Talk about bringing the battle to them. Ought to be.
Contact command. Request assistance.
No. It doesn't look like that's going to be necessary.
Oh, great.
I don't imagine that this is going to end well. The black box. It's ready.
Right.
Requesting destruction of enemy hostiles via black box reaction.
Request accepted.
Doobie, it was an honor to fight with you. Truly.
The honor was mine.
NieR Automata has to be one of the most influential games of recent times. Even now, years after its release in 2017, I often find myself playing through countless games that seem to trace their influences back to some aspect of NieR. From its character design to its visual aesthetic, world building, story, or gameplay, this is a game that has become a kind of cultural icon within the world of gaming to some degree. As for my personal experience with it, NieR Automata has captivated me for years because of its story and characters, both of which have a complexity to them that is not apparent without engaging with them on a deeper level. And, more than that, the story of NieR is one that I keep returning to because I can't help but see echoes of it within the events and narratives of the real world around us. To me, it has always seemed like the story of NieR Automata works on a broader, more abstract level that transcends the plot of the game itself. A lot of concrete stuff happens during the course of the game's story, but when I think about NieR, it exists on a metaphorical or symbolic space more than anything else. On a general sense, I'd argue that the idea or theme that lies at the core of NieR's story is that of an in-group versus out-group conflict. NieR's story takes place in a post-apocalyptic version of Earth where a war between two groups, androids and machines, has been raging on for centuries. The world of NieR is one that is held up and contained by this extremely rigid binary. Androids and machines have been at war with each other since the moment of their creation, and therefore, the identities of these two groups are defined entirely by this conflict. The whole purpose of the lives of both androids and machines is to keep fighting each other, to the point that this war between them has become a purpose unto itself. Because they are already at war, androids and machines must continue to keep fighting each other endlessly. There is no other reason for their war anymore other than the war itself. This is a paradox that reminds me of the appeal to tradition fallacy. That is, the idea or statement that something must continue to be done because that's how things have always been done in the past. War has always existed between these two groups, and so they must keep fighting each other. This conflict has become the whole identity of these two groups. In other words, the only way that androids and machines can understand themselves and their place in the world is by their opposition to each other. And the people of this world, that is, androids and machines, have become so dependent upon the structures that hold up their society that they continue to be defined by them despite the fact that said structures have become oppressive to them. The war between androids and machines no longer has any other purpose than to feed itself in an endless conflict, and yet both androids and machines have become so defined by it that they cannot exist for any other purpose either. Neither machines nor androids are free to choose their allegiance to their respective groups. They are assigned their position at birth and must follow it without question, and anybody who tries to push against or escape this central conflict that rules the world, or who has any other kind of desires besides it, or even who merely exists outside of it, is immediately seen and branded as a dangerous deviant. Machines who have broken free from the machine network, such as Pascal and the people in his village, exist as outsiders, and they are in danger of being attacked by both androids and other machines. Other examples of these are the opera singer that the player encounters as a boss fight in the attraction park, and, of course, Adam and Eve. And the same applies to androids as well. A2, an android who has turned her back to the android cause, has been branded as a dangerous criminal by Yora to be killed on sight. Even 9S himself, being curious and highly intelligent, is perceived as a threat by Yora Command because they fear that him and other scanner-type androids like him might be too intelligent for their own sake. Anybody who, by their mere existence, poses a threat to the status quo of this world is seen as a danger to society and is viciously hunted down. And yet, one thing that I find really interesting about the story of this game is that it takes place exactly at a time when the world of NieR is on the verge of historical upheaval or change. To be more specific, we enter NieR's world at a time in history when the old structures and systems that have so far upheld society can no longer keep on doing so anymore. Both machines and androids are beginning to break free from these dated social structures. Their identities can no longer be contained by the systems and ideas that have so far defined them. But before I get deeper into this, I want to first talk about the two main characters of the game, 2B and 9S. 2B and 9S are great characters because they make such good foils for each other. 9S is a scanner model android, not made for combat but for intel gathering purposes. He is smart and curious, and he often questions or ignores the orders given by Yora Command. He also constantly tries to become 2B's friend, that is, to build a bond or relationship with her that transcends their shared identity as androids designed with the single purpose of war. 2B, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. 2B is fiercely defined by her android identity and by the conflict between androids and machines. She aggressively and violently rejects anything that threatens this binary, and she is willing to die for the glory of Yora and mankind without hesitation. In other words, 2B's identity, her whole being emotionally and psychologically hinge upon the android-machine binary that lies at the center of the world, and she would gladly die protecting it. 2B is, then, the perfect android, at least as Yora perceives the perfect android to be. But as the story unfolds, 2B is forced to confront her worldview over and over, an act that slowly changes her in the process. In fact, I'd argue that the story of NieR Automata is the story of 2B learning to break free from the system that she has become dependent to. So, as I said earlier, when we enter the story of NieR, we find a world that is defined by its past. Androids and machines define themselves by the conflict that has always existed between them. They are trapped in a compulsive desire to hold on to the past and to uphold the structures that define their society and lives. Both sides are defined by the human world, a world that does not exist anymore and which lost all meaning a long time ago. As the story of the game goes on, however, we realize that this world is actually not as clean-cut as it seems, but rather that it is on the verge of a seismic kind of change. The greater shift or arc of the game's story is an overall movement away from the past and into a future of new possibilities. As 2B and 9S delve deeper into their world, they find more and more androids and machines who have decided to break free from the conflict that has defined them their whole lives. The machines are no longer this monolithic entity with the single purpose of killing androids. The machine world is now broken up into several groups, all with their own goals and communities that do not revolve around androids at all. The most important of these is Pascal's village, a small community inhabited by pacifist machines who have broken from the machine network and are tired of fighting. What this shows us is that machines have developed desires and identities that go beyond the single purpose of war and, more importantly, beyond the android-machine binary. In a similar way, the two main characters also encounter androids who no longer seem to be defined by their allegiance to Yora Command. A2 is an android who has betrayed Yora and is deemed as a dangerous criminal, and Anemone, the leader of the resistance on the ground, has begun trading with Pascal's community of pacifist machines in order to survive, a fact that shocks 2B when she first learns about it. In addition to this, 2B and 9S also encounter Adam and Eve, a new type of android-looking machines whose mere existence threatens the status quo. And it is through these interactions and through her growing bond with 9S that, as the story goes on, 2B's identity and worldview begin to shift. She slowly stops seeing herself as defined by the structures of society. She stops perceiving others based on whatever group they belong to, all of it culminating at a point later in the story when 2B is finally able to see 9S not as an android or a machine, but as a person that transcends this binary. And this is precisely also the greater shift of NieR's whole narrative. Just as 2B's worldview changes, so is the world itself moving towards a change of shattering proportions. As 2B explores the world that she thought she knew, she finds not a bloody battlefield with two clear sides, but a complex place with inhabitants who have a myriad of different desires and who are branching off in a myriad of different directions. Both machines and androids have begun to break free from the status quo that has defined their whole lives up to this point in history. This is what I mean when I say that the world of NieR is at a point, historically, when the old structures and systems that have upheld society up to this point can no longer support the changing values and identities of its inhabitants and, as such, have become oppressive to them. The world of NieR is buckling under its own weight, a fact that becomes encapsulated by one of the game's most memorable moments.
Target enemies offline. That should do it for the Goliaths.
Look out! It's recharging! Ah!
Enemy vibrations are growing in intensity. It's resonating in tandem with the area beneath the combat zone.
What the...
Unbelievable. The aliens who haven't revealed themselves in hundreds of years were hiding underground?
Machines were created by a race of aliens whose goal was to take over Earth. Androids were created by humans as a way to fight the aliens' machines. The conflict between androids and machines, then, is a continuation of the conflict between humans and aliens, a conflict that is still ongoing. This is the accepted history and state of the world as we enter the story of NieR. But all of these changes when we reach the first of the game's main plot twists, the alien discovery event. After a massive machine attack on the android resistance camp, which sees 2B and 9S take on massive Goliath machines, a large part of the city landscape caves in to reveal a hidden series of underground tunnels. And from somewhere within these tunnels, Yora detects a signal of the aliens' presence, the first one they've gotten in centuries. However, once 2B and 9S delve into the tunnels to find the source of the signal, they are shocked to discover that all of the aliens are already dead, that they have, in fact, all been dead for a very long time. This is the hidden truth that literally and symbolically lies at the heart of this world. Later, during a subsequent playthrough of the game, we will reach the second plot twist of the game, which is that the remaining humans who are supposedly hiding away in the moon have in fact also been extinct for a very long time. Both the aliens and the humans have long disappeared from this world. Yora, however, feared that the lives of androids who were designed with no other purpose than war would lose all meaning if this knowledge got out, and so they covered up the truth and continued to play this charade of the human-alien war to give androids a purpose. The conflict between humans and aliens ended a long time ago. The mere existence of humans and aliens, both of them extinct by now, is so ancient it should be a myth, And yet the hollow, meaningless echo of this conflict continues to be the foundation that upholds the present world and defines the lives and identities of machines and androids, because some of the people in power feared that the world would crumble if the truth came out. What's interesting about the alien discovery event is that through it we see that the world does indeed collapse and crumble after the truth comes out, literally and symbolically, but not because the truth poses a danger to the lives of people. The world of NieR collapses because the old societal structures built on the alien-human conflict were not enough anymore to hold the evolving identities of its inhabitants. The alien discovery event is the moment these structures finally give in, the moment the Earth shatters and reveals that aliens have in fact been long dead. This is the moment everything changes in this society, the moment the systems and narratives that frame this society finally buckle and snap under the pressure of their own outdatedness. Both machines and androids have outgrown the status quo, the binary that has so far defined them, and as such, the Earth itself literally opens up with a whole new sense of potential. Here's the thing about change, though. It's not an easy thing to achieve, even when it is the most obvious path forward. People in power will try to hold on to their power through any means necessary, but perhaps more importantly, change is hard to deal with on a more general sense, both individually and collectively. When your whole identity has been shaped and reinforced throughout your entire life by the structures and systems and ideas around you, you begin to see them as natural. When the narratives of society are so deeply ingrained into who you are from the moment you are born, it is not easy to tear them down and imagine something new. So, whenever change starts to happen, there will inevitably be a force rising to push back. NieR Automata understands this, and so, not too long after the alien discovery event, 2B and 9S are faced with a second, even more massive cataclysmic event.
Unit destroyed. Reverting back to area recon.
Wait, I'm still picking up a large enemy presence.
Didn't I kill that already?
What on? If it's that big, we should be able to see it.
Well, that's new.
Is that a machine?
It's freaking huge.
A staggeringly giant machine, bigger than anything that has ever been seen, suddenly emerges from the ocean, heading for the city. Faced against overwhelming odds, 2B and 9S take on the machine in a long, epic boss fight that spans several phases and which finally ends with the destruction of the machine. What I find so fascinating about this sequence is its placement. How this hulking machine suddenly emerges from the bottom of the sea just after the world-shattering discovery that the aliens are extinct. As the boss fight rages on, Pascal explains that he remembers this impossibly huge machine from a long time ago, when he was still connected to the machine network. He describes the machine as ancient, and he goes on to say that the machine was driven to the bottom of the ocean after it became too dangerous and hard to control. So why has this machine now suddenly awoken from its slumber after so long? Well, to me, this machine represents the world of NieR pushing back against the wave of change. As I have said before, the world of NieR is on the verge of social upheaval. If the first world-shattering event is the discovery of the aliens, a truth that could lead to the crumbling of the current structures of society and the present status quo, then the machine emerging from the ocean is a second event that occurs as a reaction to the first one. The giant machine from the ocean reignites the war between androids and machines and takes it into a new height that is impossible to ignore. Although it's not clear who is actually behind the waking of the giant machine, at least during your first playthrough, that is to say, it's not clear whether or not it is Adam and Eve who are behind this attack and what the purpose or goal of the attack is in the first place, I think that it adds up to the same thing in the end. To me, the machine emerging out of the ocean is a reactionary instinct from a world on the verge of change. It is parallel to something like suddenly having a group of white supremacists marching in Charlottesville after the city voted to remove a statue of Robert E. Lee, all of this happening amidst a greater Black Lives Matter movement sweeping the US. This is what the giant machine represents to me. This ancient thing that had been buried somewhere deep in the ocean, slumbering, almost forgotten for centuries, and which has now risen from its sleep at the precise moment where the oppressive structures of this world are in danger of shifting or crumbling apart. Eventually, 2B and 9S succeed in destroying the machine, but not without cost. After the fight, 9S is nowhere to be found. 2B follows a signal and discovers that 9S has been kidnapped by Adam and Eve and taken into the copied city, which leads me to my next topic, Adam and Eve themselves. If you're trying to pinpoint a traditional antagonist in NieR Automata, you'd probably land on Adam and Eve, but I think that there's a bit more to these characters than to just be at odds with 2B and 9S. Adam and Eve are machines who have also disconnected themselves from the machine network. In a way, their goal is to tear down the current status quo, but their motivations are flawed in the sense that they are still rooted in an obsession with a dead past that lost its meaning a long time ago. Adam and Eve are obsessed with humans. Their goal is to reach the remainder of the human resistance that they believe is still hiding away in the moon base. What they don't know is that, much like the aliens, humans have been extinct for a long time. Just like the androids who keep fighting a war in the name of people who went extinct a long time ago, Adam and Eve are desperately trying to find meaning by looking back into a dead history that doesn't actually hold any meaning anymore. In contrast to Adam and Eve, we have Pascal, another machine who has freed himself from the network but who has opted to look to the future to try and imagine something new, which is not to say that Pascal has no interest in the past. In fact, one of Pascal's side quests has you finding artifacts from the human world to bring to him. Pascal studies these artifacts from a lost world out of curiosity. We even see him reading some books written by long-dead human philosophers. But the conclusion that Pascal reaches after reading and studying the remnants of the human civilization is that he should go on his own journey of self-discovery. This is his way of trying to come to terms with the changing world around him, to grow and find a way to imagine a new future with new possibilities. Adam and Eve, on the other hand, remain trapped in the narratives of the past, something that is startlingly symbolized by the copied city itself, a blank mashup of structures taken from human cities of the past, lacking color and life, a hollow copy brought about by Adam's obsession. It is here where Adam has taken 9S to, and it is here where 2B fights and eventually kills him, setting Eve on a path of revenge to destroy androids and everything around them. For all their desires of disconnecting from the machine network, Adam and Eve's intentions ultimately do nothing but reignite the endless conflict at the center of this world. I said in the beginning that the story of NieR Automata is arguably the story of 2B's journey to break free from the dated structures and systems of society that have defined her identity and worldview. Throughout everything that she experiences, 2B grows and changes even as the world around her shifts, crumbles, and opens up to new possibilities. And it all culminates in a moment that has to be one of the best and most powerful endings that I've ever experienced in a game. But before I get to that, I want to talk a bit about what this game means to me personally. I want to give a small personal reading or interpretation of the game's story. I stated early on in this video that I think that the story of NieR Automata exists on a more general and abstract or symbolic level. And because of this, you can apply a lot of different lenses to interpret this story and they all work pretty well. After many playthroughs, I've come to realize that this game, to me, is about queerness. To be clear, NieR doesn't really explore directly the themes of sexuality, gender, and queerness, for the most part at least. However, I think that looking at the journey of 2B and 9S through the lens of what it means to be queer in a heteronormative world yields a lot of really interesting results. The strict binary of androids and machines stands to me as the perfect metaphor for the gender binary in a real world. Neither machines nor androids are free to choose which side they belong to. Their identity is assigned at birth, and once it is assigned, their whole beings, their whole lives, their whole worldviews are entirely defined by this binary. And anybody who tries to mess with it is immediately branded a deviant. Take the quote-unquote songstress, for example, who serves as the boss of the attraction park level and who is, in my opinion, one of the most striking characters of the whole game. The songstress was a machine who wanted to be perceived as feminine to gain the attention of another machine. In her efforts to grow more and more feminine, she began killing androids whom she perceived as being the ideal image of the femininity that she desired, and she began strapping their dead bodies to her own. In other words, the desire of this machine was to look like an android, to be an android, to cross the binary so that she could look the way she saw herself, and because of this, she was labeled a monster. Other interesting examples of this are Adam and Eve themselves. The first time 2B and 9S encounter Adam, it is unclear whether they are looking at an android or a machine. If there's one word that could describe them perfectly, it would be non-binary. Their very being puts into question the meaning of the binary itself, and it's not just how they look, but everything about their identities. Adam and Eve don't care about the machine-android conflict. They don't care about the status quo. They pursue their own desires, their very existence messing with the concept of what even is a machine in the first place. But, as always, the most interesting characters are 2B and 9S themselves, who stand at the center of the story. As I mentioned before, in the beginning of the story, 2B fiercely defines herself and her worldview through her identity as an android. She aggressively rejects anything that threatens her android identity, and she is willing to give her life to protect Yora. In my mind, 2B would be this world's version of a cisgender straight person whose whole psychological and emotional well-being depend on protecting the gender binary that has so far defined her life. And, again, this is why 9S is such a good foil for her. 9S is the opposite of 2B. He is curious about machines, he wants to learn more about them, their attitudes, their motivations, and he also often ignores the orders given by Yora Command. Even his gameplay mechanics underline his curiosity. He has the ability to hack into the minds of machines, to see deep into what makes them tick. But perhaps even more striking than this, he also has the ability to take over the bodies of the machines that he hacks. In other words, he can inhabit the bodies of machines. He can literally cross the android-machine binary and exist as a machine, if only for a limited amount of time. If 2B is a closed-minded cisgender person, then 9S, in contrast, is very gender fluid. And because of this, Yora Command has deemed this particular model of androids to be dangerous. As the story of the game unfolds, however, and as 2B and 9S explore and meet more and more machines and androids who have broken free of the binary that has framed their whole existences, 2B's worldview begins to shift. She becomes more and more able to see individuals as beings who transcend the dated android-machine binary, including herself. And all of it culminates in one moment at the end of the game that serves as an echo of another, earlier one. The story of NieR Automata is framed by two scenes that encapsulate the personal and collective shift of this world. In the first scene, which takes place near the beginning of the game, 2B and 9S, being overwhelmed by machine forces during their first assignment together, decide that the best way to finish their mission is to give their own lives and bodies for the Yora cause. They set off a massive explosion that takes down their enemies along with their own lives. They are willing to die because that's their purpose as androids. Back at the Yora bunker, however, 2B learns that 9S was able to save her consciousness before the explosion, but only hers. 9S's consciousness was lost, which means that the 9S she knew essentially died. This is the very first moment where we see 2B's beliefs begin to crack, if ever so slightly, as we can tell by the clenched fist that she makes as she gives a salute for the glory of mankind. The second scene, which serves as an echo of the first one, takes place at the end of the game. During the fight against Eve, 9S is forced to hack into the machine network to take away Eve's healing abilities. After the fight is over and 2B emerges victorious, 9S reveals that he was corrupted during his hacking attempt. 2B is then forced to kill 9S, stating in sorrow that things always end the same. But then something happens, something that leads into one of the most powerful moments I have ever experienced in any game. After strangling 9S to death, a machine rises from the debris left by the fight. 2B prepares to defend herself but suddenly stops when she realizes that the machine is actually 9S, who explains that he was able to latch onto the machine network and replicate himself to occupy the machine body that he now inhabits. Just as was the case in the beginning, 9S undergoes a kind of symbolic death, but this time he wakes up inside the body of a machine. 2B, realizing that 9S is okay, is completely overwhelmed with joy. And it is at this point that 2B finally and completely breaks free from her old worldview and from her dependence on a dated social structure. 9S has crossed the android-machine binary. He has essentially transitioned into the body of a machine in order to survive, and 2B, realizing this, immediately accepts him fully for who he is, whether he inhabits the body of an android or that of a machine. In other words, 2B is finally able to see 9S as an individual who transcends the outdated binary that has defined her entire life and, more importantly, she is able to accept and love him fully for who he is.
Goddamned machines! Is this a message? The data transmissions, they're resonating with each other.
Wait a second, 2B.
Who are...
It looks like I left my personal data in the machine side of things. Next thing I knew, my sense of self was regenerated over the surrounding network. Having multiple selves fused together like this is a pretty valuable experience, so I wanted to record it. But I couldn't access any storage areas yet, so I just multiplexed it over the memories of some nearby enemies so that when I returned to my own body,
Yes. I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah.
What is it that separates machines from androids like us? The machines have gained emotions, consciousness. The final screams they summoned on the edge of death. They still echo within me.